A person who thinks all the time has nothing to think about except thoughts. So, he loses touch with reality and lives in a world of illusions. By thoughts, I mean specifically chatter in the skull, perpetual and compulsive repetition of words, of reckoning and calculating. I'm not saying that thinking is bad. Like everything else, it's useful in moderation. A good servant, but a bad master. And all so-called civilized peoples have increasingly become crazy and self-destructive because through excessive thinking they have lost touch with reality. That's to say, we confuse science with the real world.
This is the beginning of meditation.
Welcome to the Experience Podcast. I am who I say I am. My name is Dennis, and I do business in the Matrix, all capital Dennis Miller.
My name is Neil Miller, and today we've got a very fascinating topic to talk about. It's one that kind of sings to my heart personally, and it's about tea and about the various ways that tea can be made and just the different aspects of it. So, my first experience with tea was growing up, being at home, being around the house. My mother would brew tea, and this would always be like a garden, a balsam tea. And I say always, but there would be times when we'd have peppermint as well. So these were teas that my mother grew in the garden, and she would brew tea and keep it in the fridge, add some sugar to it, and make an iced tea beverage. And we would drink this on a hot summer day, and it was absolutely incredible. And it still is incredible. So with that, I learned how to brew tea from my mother, and the way I was taught was to take a pot, say maybe an 8 to 10 inch pot, and to boil some water, and you'd put some tea leaves into the pot, maybe 3 or 4 stems with multiple leaves on them, 3 to 4 inch stems. So basically the bottom of your pot is covered with tea.
Okay.
And then you pour your boiling water over it, and then you have the lid on, and you let that steep for approximately 15 minutes. And then you have a tea, at this point, a hot tea beverage. Then you would let it cool off to make your iced tea.
And you would strain out the leaves like once it's done,
Sure.
like
Yes.
through some kind of a filter.
A filter or a strainer or
Okay.
something, yeah, something
Okay.
to get the chunks out of the nice liquid.
Sure.
So with me, I've kind of took it a step further, and I've really started incorporating more plants than just garden tea into the teas that I make. And one of the main reasons for doing this is for immune system health. And when you add some of these other plants, as you will see later on in the video, they have the potential to greatly increase your immune system. Also, with that, a lot of the time, the tea itself also creates a stool movement. So it basically brings about you going to the bathroom. And gut health is and has been scientifically proven to directly affect your brain health. So the reason I bring that up is because with the stool movement, you're cleaning out your gut, plus you're adding in the immune boosting properties of the tea, along with other properties and alkaloids from the plants that you use that you might not be aware of, but are still beneficial to your health and to your gut health. And this does directly affect your brain and your brain health.
So you're saying that with this tea that you're talking about that you're going to share here in a minute, there's a lot more to it than just immune system health.
It has the potential for the main reason I use it is for immune system health, but It has the potential to have actually physical benefits on your body as well as mental.
Sure. Okay. That's awesome.
And
that's very exciting.
Sure. And the reason I bring up the physical is because it adds to and it highlights some of your it brings out the health that you already have within.
Sure.
So I have some ingredients here, and we're just going to go right over it. We're going to begin with peppermint. Peppermint, I already mentioned, it is a mint tea that my mother used to use at home, and it can be grown outside. Pretty sure you can also buy it at the store, but obviously your own picked and if it's growing underneath the sun, it has properties of the sun that are in the plant. So it's very beneficial if you can grow it yourself and pick it yourself. So peppermint is an ingredient that I commonly use. Before we get into the rest of these, there's quite a few. So when I started making this tea, one of the first ingredients that I added to the peppermint and the balsam tea, balsam is another type of tea that is can be grown outside. It's also a green tea. So
it's one of my favorites.
Yes, balsam and peppermint are basically your two main categories of your green teas that can be grown in this specific area. And then there's spearmint, and I believe that spearmint is a cross between balsam and peppermint. So it has accentuate properties of both plants.
Okay.
So the next ingredient that I want to bring up is mushrooms, and specifically turkey tails. And so I learned about turkey tails about a year ago per se, and it would have been towards the beginning of 2020 or maybe the fall of 2019, I first learned of turkey tails. And the turkey tail mushroom is a fantastic immune system booster. And there's actually supplements that you buy at the store that have specifically, it says on the ingredients, turkey tail mushrooms. And the reason for this is to help with your immune system. And so when I learned about this, and I learned that they grow everywhere, And what I mean by everywhere, the turkey tail mushrooms, there's literally probably some growing in your backyard outside of your house right now.
And where can most of those grow on like decaying wood or
They grow
like
on
rotten logs or
yes.
Okay.
They are part of the decaying process, really. They help to break down the wood.
Okay.
And what they look like is they have kind of a fan shape layered on top of each other. And that is wonderful. Thank you for doing that. So what you're looking at right there is turn it sideways because that would be how it would be growing. Turn it flat. So there you go. So that is how they grow on a log. And what you're looking at is turkey tail mushrooms. And so to use that, you could probably use approximately half of that and show the underside. When see how that's so white. So when those are fresh and new, the underside of them is going to be, or even the top of the mushroom would be white and kind of rubbery. And those are extremely good immune system boosters, and they grow outside pretty much in your backyard. Those specific ones there I found at a state park. I love going to state parks, and I'll just keep my eye open when I'm there.
Sure.
So that's one of the first ingredients that I began adding to peppermint and to balsam tea to help with the immune system boosting properties. And now when I added that, I began brewing it a little bit longer. And so I would brew it for approximately 25 to 30 minutes now.
Okay.
And so in doing this also, I do not boil my water anymore because I've found that the boiling actually destroys some of the alkaloids that are in the plant and some of the properties of it. So now what I do is I just bring it to a boil, and then as soon as it reaches that point, I turn it all the way down to low heat and let it simmer.
Okay.
Not boil, just to get steam going.
Sure.
For 25 to 30 minutes, and then I turn it off and let it just sit and cool off for another 10 minutes till your steam goes down, because there's a lot of alkaloids in your steam. Once that is all settled, you're ready to pour your tea. So turkey tails is one mushroom that you can add. Psilocybin mushrooms can also be added to tea, and this will give a psychoactive effect. And as we continue, you're going to see there's the options for tea are they are as open as your creativity.
So basically there's an infinite amount of teas that you can make.
Infinite's a big word, but I would say
I think that's
yes.
accurate though.
I would say yes.
And one thing that I want to ask too, for the people that are listening is, like, as you're going through this list, you can pick and choose the ingredients the kind of tea that you want to make based on how you want to feel. Is that what I'm hearing here?
That is very accurate.
So depending on what you're feeling, maybe that week, or how you want to feel the next week, if you want to be proactive with your health, if you see that, you're getting some shitty weather coming in, snow's starting to fall, and you got stuffy nose, sniffly, whatever, you might want to consider making some turkey tail mushroom tea with some peppermint or something.
Yes.
Or with some echinacea.
Yes.
So I mean, that's what I love about what this podcast is about, is that you can self-analyze yourself and be like, okay, this is how I want to feel, this is how I'm feeling now, but this is how I really want to feel. And then based on that, you can make a tea that will get you to where you're closer to that state of being.
So with that being said, there is no tea that can bring something out of you that is not already present within you. So the way that you want to feel is already present within you. But the tea has the ability to create optimal health.
Yes.
And with that being said, some of these ingredients do have calming effects, and some have more of an exciting effect, and some of them do not have so much of a mental effect as they do just a health effect, to where it'll boost your immune system or just create overall better gut health.
Sure.
So one of the next ingredients that I have is echinacea. And echinacea is a flower. And with the echinacea, this it grows outside in the wild, and it's a cone flower, and it's related to other cone flowers, and it's a pink flower with a brown top in the middle of it, and the whole plant can be used to make tea. The roots, the leaves, the stems, and the flower part. And currently today, scientists do not have a specific part of the plant that they say is best
Wow.
for
That's
boosting your
incredible.
immune system.
Wow.
So even current day scientists just essentially say that the whole plant is the option, because there's not a part of the plant that has more or has less, essentially.
Okay. So I got a question. So we're getting into fall now, and you pick echinacea. You go, you find them beside the road. You find them growing somewhere close by woods, whatever. What is the process that you do so that you have echinacea the whole year round? Like from this season here until next season, what is the process that you go through so that you have echinacea to make tea all week, all winter long? Because the winter is when you're going to need your immune system the most.
100%.
So what is the process that you go through when you pick this?
So, and that goes along with more than just the echinacea. This goes for the turkey tails and for a lot of ingredients that are on this list.
Yes, okay.
So we'll begin with the echinacea. And with the echinacea, what I'll do is I'll gather it in bundles, and
Pick it.
I do not clip it. I physically
Right.
pull the roots out of the ground, because I do feel like the roots have good properties
Sure.
along with the rest of the plant.
Okay.
So then I make sure that they're clean, and I will spread them out on drying racks. And with it being clean, by clean, I specifically am talking about not having dirt on the roots.
Okay.
The rest of the plant, if it's nice to pick them after rain, because then they pull up easier.
Yep.
So, and after rain, they're going to be pretty well clean. So even if there's some bugs or things on them, those bugs and things will be strained out in your tea, and it will add protein to your tea. So the cleanliness does not have to be perfect.
Sure.
And also a reason for that is when you look at a baby and you see a baby crawling around, moving around on the floor,
Yeah.
everything that comes into their hand or line of vision is going into their mouth. It's getting stuck in their mouth. And there's anything. This stuff is laying on the ground. This stuff is not clean.
Yeah.
So why do they put it in their mouth? The reason is because they're introducing themselves to a variety of different alkaloids that are on the ground and around their area. That way it builds up their immune system to these alkaloids, and now next time they put something from the ground into their mouth, they will not get sick because their immune system is introduced to it. The same idea applies to this tea. It's about introducing some of these plants into you and getting the alkaloids. Now, when you're out in the wild and you have pollen or whatnot in the air, you will be less susceptible because you have a built-up immune system, and your immune system already has a general idea of some of these plants.
Sure. Okay.
So with the echinacea, once they're moderately clean, I spread them out on drying racks and let them dry. And then that process usually lasts about 2.5 weeks. And it's better to make sure they're more dry rather than less.
Okay.
And I specifically just air dry them. I put them over a AC vent that's coming from the floor of my house to help with the drying process. And then at that point, they can be cut to manageable size pieces. And by manageable, I'm talking about being able to fit into a pot.
Yeah, okay.
And then they can be put into brown bags and stored for up to and over a year.
And you're talking like, when you say brown bags, you're talking like something that's breathable, like all these bags.
They're not necessarily breathable, but what they are so dry that even if there's some moisture, the bag usually kind of
Absorbs it.
Okay.
Okay.
So that's why it's good to store them in that type of container.
Sure.
So that's kind of the drying process. So we talked about echinacea. Another thing that you can use is white pine bark. And this white pine bark has vitamin A, B, C, and D. There is a lot of good vitamins in white pine bark. And when I'm using this, it's specifically not the outside bark that you use, but you peel off the outside bark, and then you get into that membrane between the hardwood and between the outside bark. And that soft membrane of the white pine tree is what can be used to make tea. And this specific thing from this tree can also be sliced very thin and fried in a pan and salted and eaten as white pine chips. So there's multiple uses for it. But what we're talking about today is white pine bark tea. So it's an addition that can be added to your tea to add vitamins and minerals. And the white pine, this tree it's pretty common in the area where we're at. So that's an addition, and it has a kind of a bitterness, a slight bitterness, almost like a tartiness to it when you add it. So if you're looking for that flavor, or I mainly do it for the minerals and the vitamin content.
Something that I want to make people aware of is the fact that white pines might be popular here where we're at, but depending on where you're watching the video from, white pine might not be very popular. But here's the thing that I do know is that even if we don't have it, even if we don't bring it up in today's podcast, I guarantee you there are plants in your area that are edible that will do similar things as the white pine or other ingredients here. So it's not like this list is strictly the only ingredients.
That's very well stated.
I just want to make sure people know
because
that.
based on the area of where you're at, there's going to be other plants and
Yes.
other varieties of plants that can be used to make tea, and it's going to be a completely different tea, and it might not have any of these on there, depending on the region.
Yeah.
So that's very important that you pointed that out. And also, with that being said, do your own research on
Yeah.
all of these plants. These are plants that I researched before I use them, and it's very important that you do your own research before you use any of these to make your own tea. So the next one that I have is CBD hemp, and with the CBD hemp, like your yawn shows, it's a relaxer, and it's a plant related to the marijuana plant, But the difference with this CBD hemp plant is that it's been grown indigenously in Indiana it was one of the largest cash crops, and they used it for textiles, for clothing, for
Car seeds.
multiple uses of
Yeah.
this hemp plant. And the hemp plant does produce some THC, but it's in very low amounts, so low amounts that it's not used or considered by marijuana users. But what it does have large amounts of is CBD, and CBD is a extreme relaxer. So I found some CBD hemp growing wild in the area where I live at. And this is a relaxer that I've used to add to my teas, and that's exactly what it does. And also, it does more than relax. You're now getting the complete alkaloid content of that plant in your tea. That goes the same with echinacea, peppermint, and balsam. So that's another thing that can be added. Then we also have a plant called All Heal, and this plant has approximately 20 different names, 25 different names for it. It's a small purple flower that grows beside roadsides, and it blankets the sides of roadsides in the spring, and it stays in blossom until about midsummer, up until
Really?
midsummer. And then around midsummer, that's kind of when the cycle's over for the All Heal, and they kind of die out. So you really want to get them and pick them, harvest them in the spring or the first of the summer months.
Okay.
And what this purple All Heal flower does, it's actually, the whole plant is edible, and it can be added to salads as a fresh green. But also with the All Heal, it's been used indigenously with Native Americans for centuries, and it's a plant that I feel like is very good to add to tea for the alkaloids and what it can provide for the body, for your gut health. So that's another one that we have and can be used.
Okay.
So next there is mullein, and mullein is a very worthwhile plant to look into. This plant, mullein, can grow up to 6-7 feet tall. It can be a massive plant. When you pick them when they're younger, they're usually fresher. So mullein gets leaves, big green leaves like that. And with the mullein, it's almost got a fuzzy film over the plants and the stalk. And then as it matures, it grows like a seed pod at the top with a bunch of yellow flowers on the seed pod. And that seed pod can be used for tea as well.
Okay.
And literally with the mullein, the entire plant can be used. The root system, the leaves, the main stalk. And the reason that mullein is a great solution for your tea, and this can be used to make tea by itself as well, just as a mullein tea. And what mullein tea does is it opens up your sinuses, and it opens up your sinuses as well as in your throat. If you have phlegm, it reduces phlegm and it just cleans your throat out. So mullein is a great tea for congestion. It really opens up your sinuses and opens up your throat. So that's something that can also be added to peppermint or balsam or whatever variation of these other teas, as well as making a tea just with the mullein.
Okay.
Then there's also marijuana with THC. So you can essentially create your own edible. It would be considered like an edible THC because it's being absorbed through your stomach. So you can actually add regular marijuana to tea to have a psychoactive effect. And this is a relaxing, and it's an effect that varies person to person. So do your own research before using any of these ingredients.
And also something that I want to point out here is that this video is for educational purposes only. We are not promoting drug use, so just wanted to point that out.
Absolutely. So also another ingredient that can be used is matcha. And matcha is a green tea that is from Japan. And this is something that I purchased in a powder form at Walmart.
Okay.
And I've said it many times that I love saying it because Walmart, anybody can live extremely healthy from the Walmart store. And I kind of cringe saying it because it's not the best health, but you can live a very moderately healthy life from Walmart stores. They have some great products when you know what to buy and
How to use them.
and when you begin to spend more money on your food than you do on your clothes. Because when you do that, then you begin to change your consciousness through the foods that you're eating.
Yes.
So matcha, it would be in a category all on its own, similar to peppermint or balsam, because it is a tea that grows. And this tea has an effect psychologically. And the way that it makes you feel, it promotes a calm energy. And the reason I say calm energy because it is different than caffeine. Caffeine is just energy. There's no calmness to caffeine. With the matcha, it's a very mild, it does not feel like a stimulant, but it does feel, you do feel more awake.
Okay.
So that is something that can be used or added or used on its own.
Okay.
And then there's another thing is sassafras. And sassafras is a interesting one because it directly affects the dopamine release in your brain. And with sassafras, it can be added to tea, but most times it's made as a tea by itself. It would also be good potentially to add turkey tails to that to have that immune system boosting properties. With that being said, I usually add turkey tails to any tea that I make just because of the immune system.
Yeah.
I love taking care of my immune system. I prefer to stay healthy. So with the sassafras, it's extremely compelling in the sense that when you drink it, you feel good. And the reason for that is because it releases stored dopamine in your brain. And the flip side to that is after you've drank it and after the effects wear off, you have zero dopamine where you used to have a stored amount of dopamine. So be careful and cautious of how often that you use sassafras tea. And yes, so that's the sassafras. Another ingredient that can be added to any of these teas is coconut oil. And the reason I say this is because the coconut oil can be added to bring out some of the alkaloids that are in the tea,
Sure.
and that is essentially the reason for it, is to just kind of bring it out, and it will make your tea a little bit thicker, but it can be a very small amount that can be added to it.
Okay.
So we have another ingredient that we have is dandelion roots. Do you have something to share?
I
on
do,
dandelion
yeah.
roots?
I was actually I was about to mention that. If had
Sure.
you not mentioned, I would have. So my grandma is 93 years old, and I remember hearing a story from my mom that when she was a kid, that my grandma would go out and dig up the roots of the dandelions, and she would dry them. She would dry the roots and grind them up and put them in little capsules, and then take them throughout that whole year. And the thing that the reason I brought that up is there is a little bit of cancer in my bloodline. So my grandma's had mild cases of cancer, but what's interesting to me is that I believe the reason that she is 93 going on 94 is because of the fact that she did things like that. She took things that were around her that were free, but that were very beneficial to her health, and she used them in a way that nurtured her own well-being.
Absolutely.
So I just think it's very, very exciting how all of these ingredients, no matter where we are in the world, we can find things that will boost and help maintain a healthy lifestyle.
Absolutely.
So that's very, very exciting. And what about sweeteners? Do you use sweeteners like?
I'm glad you brought that up. So with sweeteners, what I use is honey.
Okay.
I pretty much use honey for every tea that I make.
Okay.
Because with all natural ingredients, I feel like adding sugar is a disgrace to the naturalness that I just
Sure.
put into it.
Yes.
So I use honey as a sweetener. And what you were saying about the well-being of your grandma and of the dandelion roots from the ground, with all these plants, when you're taking them, it creates a connection to the ground, to Mother Earth, to Gaia, from which you took them. Whether you know it or not, through the alkaloids, through the plants, you create a more deeper connection with the earth. So I wanted to point that out.
That's very important. And should you so let's say you make a big batch of tea. How long is that good for? And is it good in the refrigerator for a certain amount of time, or?
Sure. So the way that I'm really glad you brought this up. So I just want to explain how I use tea on a daily basis. And so what I'll do on the weekend is I'll make a big pot full of tea, enough that it's plenty of tea. And then what I'll do is add my sweetener, put it in the fridge, and then this will stay good for a week and a half max. So not that long, but it's long enough. So with that, once that's in the fridge, what I'll do once I get off my job, which is joy over boredom, once I'm finished with that, I will, as soon as I'm at home, I will take 2-3 swallows of tea, not even a glass, literally this much of an 8-ounce glass. And the reason I do this is for the very simple fact to boost my immune system every day. And I mentioned earlier that it promotes stool movement. And as soon as I drink this, I will be using the restroom soon after. And when I have an empty stomach and empty bowels, I feel extremely light, and I just feel like I can move better and feel better. And I know that there's people that have stool movement once a day or once every 2 days, and you'll feel very congested if you have that type of a lifestyle. And when you keep your bowels empty and when you just keep it clean, you'll feel lighter. You'll physically feel lighter. So that's how I generally use it. And yes, it lasts for about a week and a half.
Sure. Very interesting. This is a very, very, very good. Something that, are you finished with something that I'd like to bring up too, that I just want to point out and make people aware of is, especially with COVID. I mean, we got that going around, and
That's literally the reason that I began to make this.
Yeah.
And I branched out from what my mother taught me to adding ingredients that benefit my well-being.
yes. And the cool thing about this is that you can go out in nature and you can find these things. And if the store doesn't have vitamin C or echinacea or any of that, now you have the power. You have the power to dictate your health. Not the store, not the government. No authority can tell you what the fuck you put into your body. Only you get to decide that. And that's the beautiful thing about making tea, is it puts the power into your hands. It puts the power of your health into your hands, and whoever's listening to you and to me and everybody else. And that's the solution to ending this bullshit. COVID bullshit.
That's one solution.
One.
So that was very well said. I feel very grateful for being able to express this information today and to bring forth what we did. And with that, I want to give thanks to the viewer for your time and attention. And if you made it to this part of the video, your time is highly valued and appreciated. One love.
Peace.